Hi everybody, I'm Bill Sanders and this is Watch Art Sci, the art and science of watch collection. Today what I want to do is to talk about the Lyrique group and what we do and why we do what we do. And this is the second watch that we're finishing up right now. And we ran into a number of issues and we're still trying to resolve, and we're doing it. It hasn't been easy. It's cost us more than we planned on. So there are all kinds of things that are tough about it. But bear with me on this because while I'll tell you, there is not a single member who's been through a Lyrique project, especially from the beginning, who doesn't understand a whole lot more about watches than he or she. We had one woman, I guess we don't have ladies anymore, she was a lady too, who've been our groups, and they'll tell you a lot more than you think you know. So trust me on this. So that's one thing. And so what I'm doing is that I really am encouraging others to give it a shot and let me know what you think. Okay, let's get started. Okay, this is Lyrique number 2. We had this case, and we thought we had the same movement. And so what we're going to do is do exactly like we had with Étude number 1, and simply put a Guilloché dial on it, sort of a really nice dial. The dial was planned and turned out actually the first time around was really nice. And so, what can go wrong? And we planned to use the same bespoke movement. It was called AG86801 we had with Étude number 1. Okay, now let me tell you something. This is the watch as it came out initially, and this was what we envisioned initially. Long story here. Okay, first of all, the rationale behind having Lyrique centered around really having top quality watches based on manufacture that was multiplied. Well, this is what happens, and this turns into the rationale. The price of a good watch is generally multiplied between a factor of 6 to 10 times. So if you spend, let's say, $1,000, okay, total $1,000 to produce a watch, and you want to sell it and be successful, you're going to need to add advertising, shipping and warehousing, discount to retail dealers, and plus add a profit. Ours is totally non-profit, the opposite of profit. But the basic math still holds. The manufacturer costs, in more realistic terms, I think that we started with somewhere around a budget around 9,000 Swiss francs. This is what it's going to cost us. Now, what I was in publishing for a number of years, and sort of the rule of thumb, not only with publishing but with a whole lot of things, and to some extent with some watch companies, is about 10 to 1. So, but I was told by one person who's sort of been around a lot with watches, it's about really more like 6 to 1. Okay, so let's say that we put in 9,000 Swiss francs or $9,000 or grob checks. It doesn't matter, whatever you have, and you multiply that by 6, and you end up with 54,000. That would be the MSRP. Now, if we're just purchasing the watch and we set it up as a subscription watch in the same way that Abraham Breguet did, the model was based on this. They have a small payment up front, and so I think it was about a quarter that you'd pay up front for one of Breguet's watches. So it made it more affordable. So he had a small amount, but he had plenty to make the watch with. He only needed a portion of that. It was good for the buyer because the buyer then didn't have to pony up the whole amount. Okay, so that was easier on the buyer and it was helpful to the watchmaker. Now, the Lyrique modification of that, we say laid out payments over time. So that was the plan. And so by the time the watchmaker had finished, both the buyer and the seller were fully paid. Okay, so we're gonna make a $9,000 watch, maybe 10,000, or let's say 10 to make it easier. So anyway, by our approach to it was essentially with that in mind. We had a number of people who had already signed up. It wasn't too hard to get 100, and we had a waiting list on top of that. So if somebody changed their mind, they could get their money back. The reason that Lyrique had a modification was to spread the payments over time, was in the same way that Breguet understood more people could afford it that way. That's all it was. It was good for the producer, for the suppliers, the movement makers, the hand makers, and the butcher and baker and candlestick maker. It was good for everybody in that they had money to deal with for production. Okay, and then when they were finished with it, they'd have not only been paid, but they'd have had used some of the money in the production. Basically, was the way it worked. It's not that difficult really to understand. All right, so this is how we were organized. We had a simple organization. We had a project coordinator. This was a job that I did. And this was a link between the Swiss manufacturer and designers and the Lyrique members. What a job. Then we have a banker, and thank goodness on this second one, we had actually we didn't get it until the third one, so I was still doing the banking as well as the other work. But right now, Lyrique has a banker, a separate banker. We have 3 transfer coordinators. Now, the reason we have 3, we have people all over the world who are interested in this, watch collectors. We had pretty much an Asian and an Australian group, so that was one group. We had a group in the Americas, that was another group. Then we had a European group. We included Africa with that as well as India. So that was how we had it set up with the 3 transfer coordinators. So that was pretty simple, really, when you look at it. You got a project coordinator, a banker, and then 3 transfer coordinators. We have a webmaster, and he's sort of in a funny position because he does exactly what we'd like him to do, but there's not much to do. It's sort of like, usually a webmaster, they're trying to get a whole bunch of people, and we more or less say, well, contact so-and-so if you're interested in joining, and that's what we've done. We also ended up with a great guy who decided to make a book about us, and it was fantastic. So now he's our book creator too. Now, the members, that was, of course, the other role, I guess, even though all of the other people involved were members in the sense that we had all wanted one of the watches too, basically invested in it. So they provided approval, input, and transfer funds to the banker. Okay. A new role that sort of emerged on this watch was kind of be a quality control. And the quality control really was between all of the suppliers and making sure that the quality of everything they did was right. And this was what had happened was that before all of the watches, the movements were assembled by Agenor, and so they'd provide a fully made movement. But somebody had to put all of these together and make sure they all worked. Had to put the hands on, the dial on, get the case, get everything fitted just right, then put the case together and wind it up and test it, make sure everything was working okay. Well, this has turned out to be a real godsend. There's a company that was co-located. They were also co-located with Agenor. Since then, today they're moving about 10 miles away because they needed, I think, a little more space, and so but they're still working together. Switzerland's very easy, or at least especially Geneva, that there are all kinds of companies working on watches, and they have special couriers back and forth taking things, so that when the movement is finished, then they'll send it over to May, and they'll put together all of the different parts, and then they'll send it to another one, or to a shipper, okay? But they make sure everything's done. Okay, so that's sort of the way the whole organization is supposed to work anyway. Now, we thought, boy, this is going to be a piece of cake because we're using the same movement, the same case, two of our biggest expenses. So we cut it back on the development expenses for both of those. And we thought this is going to be cool. The only thing that was new, and we did end up spending more money on the dial. In fact, that was planned so that we'd have a nice Guilloché dial. What happened, first of all, there was had to be a case re-signing. What happened, there was a link, or missing link, between the case maker, the designer, and Agenor, because you really need a designer. I mean, not just someone who can draw a picture on the dial, but rather who understands how all of the dimensions of all parts of a watch are, so that they all work together well. And what happened was that, hey, all we got to do is just, have Agenor make some movement and take them over to the case maker and pop them in, because we've already, they already know what to do. Well, somewhere in there, Agenor wanted to improve the movement, the 6801. So nobody told them, or nobody told somebody, but we don't know where, and doesn't help to start screaming at the moon. It's good to know, to sort of the people who should have made the communication know who they are, and that's enough. As an aside, you need to work with good people, and we do. We decided from the get-go we're going to work with the best. Same thing that would cost us 6 times as much. So we were very close to our choice. So what happened, they got going on AGH 6801 fitting size, and it turned out that there was a little change, and this was the improvement that Agenor made. So they already had the cases done, so it cost us an extra 50,000 Swiss francs to the cost to fix the whole thing, because they had to re-mill or re-everything, all of the movements they had already made. So they're going to say, well, you guys screwed up somewhere around the line, so it's going to cost you. Fair enough. So anyway, we got that squared away. And the next thing was, okay, let's get the Guilloché dial. Now, what happened in the meantime was that the head of the dial maker left. Okay, he was the expert on Guilloché and a lot of other aspects about dials and watches and hands and everything that had to go together. Okay, well, there were other people. Nobody is totally irreplaceable, except in this case, where we would run into these things. So anyway, so they said, okay, we're going to fix the dial for you. So they had the hour chapter ring and the second chapter rings in gold, and the numbers were in gold, the hands were in gold. Hands. We wanted to have observatory hands again like we had on the first one, so we figured, that's another way there's not going to be a big development cost on that. So anyhow, they delivered the first watch, and the dial was pink. We had asked, we said, well, we had planned on a burgundy one. Well, for all kinds of reasons, burgundy just didn't work out with the process that they had in place, and what we thought was going to be a version of rose that was really burgundy turned out pink. So here we got, so they sent us these 5 pink dials to sort of I guess they were like something like a prototype, but more than that. So what are we going to do? Well, fortunately, we were one of our sort of sources of doing good is the Horological Society of New York. And they have an annual gala, and at the gala they have an auction, and the monies from that auction goes to the scholarship fund that they have. If you're familiar with Only Watch, that's what it's like. Well, the Only Watch, we didn't have, we had, I figured, okay, well, we got some pink ones, and they're not going to be very many of those ever. And so I said, hey guys, we have a unique dial for you. It's pink. So they were delighted with it. Great guys, by the way. Also, let me put in a plug for them. If you're a watch collector, really enhance your own existence by joining the Horological Society of New York. Okay, so we finally got the burgundy color squared away. And the problem was that after they had the switch, there were a lot of gaps, knowledge gaps, I should say. So they did the burgundy, and exactly the color we wanted. That picture of the watch I had at the opening was one. Well, when we got them, they started oxidizing. All right. So the first group happened to be the U.S., and so what we had to do, we had to send all of these oxidized and oxidizing maroon or burgundy watches back. And so that was like, so we talked to the dial maker. Said, look, man, this is what we paid for. We didn't pay for something that was oxidized. Somebody should have known that. So ever since then, we have been trying to get the correct dials, non-oxidized ones. One way of that, we found out that I would never become a dial maker by choice, at least a Guilloché one, unless you know what you're doing. Because, man, I'll tell you, the only certain types of colors which are essentially a mix of chemicals with the particular metal, things will oxidize if not done right. So they said, okay, well, we found out that blue, gold, or brown will work. Any of those interesting? So we had a vote like we do on so many things. 3 more or less evenly distributed votes, and one of them wins, they're going to be 2 out of 3 people are going to be unhappy. That's pretty much what happened. So somebody said, "Oh, find out if we can have a choice between, and then we can split the group up, and we'll have X number of these and X number of these and X number of these." So I did, and they said, "Yeah, we can do it." That'd be great. So then we had to go back and get everybody squared away on that. So finally, we got it to the point where they could, okay, we're going to start making these dials. Well, when they first arrived, a lot of them, they looked great. And but what happened, and is we're still trying to resolve right now, is that they have to be, some are done right and some are unacceptable, basically, what it comes to. And that needs some explanation. There's our pink watch. We made 5, by the way, and they immediately went. We had one for the Horological Society. We had one each and then the other 4 hours, anybody could have one. And I had committed pretty much. I said, "Oh, nobody else wants it, I'll take it." Not a chance. Or people wanted them. Okay, so now we're getting these dials that some are fine, some weren't. And that was very difficult because this is what a properly done will look like. This is a brown Guilloché, or brown dial with Guilloché. And it looks great. The brown work, the Guilloché, you can see the depth, you can see the differentiation. And so the watches that came back in brown or blue or gold that look like this, those are great. But then some other ones showed up that were uneven. The one on the left is to give you some ideas of the unevenness. And the one on the right, they were done fine. And you can tell how distinct they are versus the one on the left. They were flat, they were sort of clumped, and there was sort of in general, just sloppy job. So we have these two here, the same company that had both of them. And so, we said, "Look, guys, these are not acceptable." I took them back, and it cost them, but we weren't the ones who messed it up for a change. They did. So they were trying to get it fixed, but they were taking their sweet time about it. And as time went on, we started having these added expenses. Now, I told you about the remaking of the case for the ADH 6802. Or is it AHG? Anyway, it's one of those. Okay. It was 10,000 Swiss francs, and so that was rough. They added the shipping costs. That was another 3,100 Swiss francs that were added to it. The change in the from the rate of exchange had changed. In our bank, we only could bank U.S. dollars. So people from all over the world would send in their money with no matter what it was, and then the bank would have all the money. And then once we got the invoice, we would pay it. But the pay had to be in Swiss francs, and so the bank would then take that amount, charge whatever the rate exchange was, and then knock off a few bucks for themselves, or a few points, I should say, from themselves. So the value changed by 10%, and that roughly cost us 10,000 Swiss francs from our budget. Could have gone the other way. All in 2024, it was actually a way of making money, because the value of the dollar went up versus the value of the Swiss francs. However, beginning around, I think, the 20th of January of this year, the ratios started taking a big hit. And there was roughly a 10% loss. And so, like I said, that's roughly 100,000 Swiss francs. So we had to come up with that again. Now, this is for the U.S. only. They added 10% tariff. I hope that's all it's going to be. But it could be more. I wish it would be less. But see, this is because of these things that cause the delay. Okay, we're going to fix it for you, and we'll just take our sweet time doing it. This cost us when that happened. So anyway, it's, while not a happy outcome, the watches, once are all done, all the dials correctly done, will look fantastic. And once that's accomplished, the fat lady can sing. This is why we have a Wagnerian opera about the way things get done. Okay, now, believe it or not, this is to encourage people who are thinking of doing this themselves. Lyrique isn't in competition with anybody. We just, because nobody else has watches like ours, because all of them are bespoke. It's been great for the people we work with in Switzerland because we always pay on time. I think that's a very important thing to do if you're going to deal. No one's going to trust you if you don't pay your bills. And so we wanted to not only do that, but as soon as we got an invoice, send it in. Okay, so let me tell you, even though with all the mess we had, remember each watch is roughly, we're saving 4,500,000 Swiss francs over conventional MSRP. And that's about a $5 million savings with 100 watches. So even with all the problems that we ran into, that's what kind of savings it is. Now, on the left there, you can see these are all of the watches we have now. 2 of them we didn't plan on. Well, actually, four of the 5 Étude number 2s we didn't plan on. We wanted to have one purple one or burgundy one for all of us. But instead, first we got the pink one. We were able to dispose of that with no problem at all and didn't cost us anything extra. And then we had the oxidation problem, so we had to send them back, find colors that would work. And finally we came back with, then they have a brown, gold, and blue. This is a blue one that unfortunately was one of the ones that didn't turn out right. I knew that ahead of time because of our quality control guy in Switzerland. But I was just wanted to see for myself, and he was right. I mean, he really knows this stuff. But I just had to have one. I said, okay, this is what they look like, and it's very flat. But on the other hand, everything else about it is just gorgeous. It was just the Guilloché that was crumbed up. And so once that's squared away, if they just do them all right once, they'll be done with this. And because it's getting expensive for them too. And but we've already been taken to the cleaners on that. Having said that, we've already got 2 other watches in the work. First of all, we have one called Era Zulu. Era Zulu has 2 retrograde arms, one in the center called Zulu. We call it Zulu. Era Zulu means Zulu hour in French. And it's a pilot's watch. It's a pilot sports watch. And the idea behind it was to feature the Zulu arm because this is what pilots use. I mean, no matter where you are, you can be in Timbuktu or Kalamazoo, and you're on the same time as far as Zulu hour is concerned. So we had a watch that had a separate Zulu arm. Be a great thing for pilots because they could just look at their watch and find out what the Zulu time is, no matter what the local time is. Okay, so that's underway. We already have a prototype of the new movement. It's AGH 6850. This is the picture I have. There is a picture of the dial side where we have the 2 retrograde movements. We have a double snail cam down at the bottom, and then a regular snail cam for the retrograde of the Zulu arm, and then at the bottom at 6 o'clock we'll have the second hand. Anyway. Okay, so if you're thinking about this is, in a way, it's a cautionary tale, but the more you know before you go into this, and the better the planning, the better it's going to work. We had planned one thing in this and turned out with something entirely different. And the old thing about any plan in the military in war, as good as after the first gun is shot, that's it. I mean, everything else starts falling apart. And if you look at the history of war, that's exactly what's happened just in every major battle. The trick is is to know what your plan is, and you know what your goal is, know what your resources are, and plan. And you got to plan that something's going to go change. Okay, I won't say necessarily wrong. Sometimes things change in your favor. Not a lot, but that can happen. Anyway, I'd like to know what you think. It's your opinion of it. My watch, flawed Guilloché, but it still looks good anyway. All right, let me know what you think. That's an opportunity to subscribe if you like. Until next time, this is Bill Sanders for Watch Art Side, the art and science of watch collection.